Hello, and welcome to another episode of 30 Days of Halloween. And today we are looking at what was reported to be the most haunted house in England. First, we need to go to Essex and the northern border of Essex to a little tiny place called Borley. Borley is a tiny civil parish close to Sudbury. The name Borley could be a compound of the Saxon words bap and lay, which means boar's pasture. Alternatively, could be from the Celtic word bory, meaning summer's meadow. As I said, it is a tiny little parish which consists of 3 clusters of building. One closest to the River Stour includes the village hall, one around the parish church, and the third at Borley Green. There are a total of 49 dwellings in Borley. It is tiny. Borley steeps with history. It is included in the Domesday Book. It is notable for the high proportion of listed buildings. There are 15 Grade 2 listed houses, including Borley Hall and Borley Place and Borley Lodge. And the Grade 1 listed church is a small building of stone, originally in the Romanesque early English style of the late 12th and 13th centuries. But we're not here to talk about any of them buildings. We're here to talk about a building that no longer stands. We're here to talk about. In 1862, Reverend Henry Dawson Ellis Ball built the rectory. Rumour has it that prior to starting construction, Ball was warned the land was haunted and that it had once been the home of a Benedictine monastery. A local legend tells of a young nun who had lived in a neighbouring nunnery at Burrs. She had fallen in love with a monk who lived in the monastery at Borley. Though they had taken their vows and their relationship was forbidden, they made plans to run off together. The couple's plans were discovered and they were quickly punished. There, on the grounds of the monastery, the monk was hanged. As for the nun, her punishment was far worse. Back at the nunnery, she was bricked up inside the walls while she was still alive. Her tormented spirit would eventually escape and return to Borley, searching for her love. The ghost of the nun was spotted outside the rectory so often that one area is nicknamed the Nun's Walk. A small summer house was built in the area from which a person would have a better vantage point to watch the nun as she wandered the grounds. Ignoring the rumours, Ball moved forward with the construction, building on top of the ruins of the former rectory. His new rectory was built in the Gothic style with red brick and stood 2 stories and spanned nearly 4 acres. Almost immediately, things began to happen. The Ball family could hear disembodied footsteps following behind them as they walked. Spirits appeared, not just to one member of the family, but to everyone. Servant bells would ring even when no one was present, and even after the wires had been cut. The ghostly activity was most prevalent in the area of the home where Ethel, one of the Ball's youngest daughters, slept. Her door was knocked on and she could hear heavy footsteps in the hall. Once, as she lay in bed, Her face was slapped by an invisible hand. Ethel's nursemaid, Elizabeth Byford, quit after just 2 weeks, terrified from the haunting footsteps that paced outside her room at midnight. Most families would have moved out, but not the Ball family. Reverend Henry Ball died in the Blue Room on May the 2nd, 1892, after which his son, Reverend Henry, known as Harry Foister, took over his duties. The ghostly activity continued. Some would even say it increased. One day, while in the garden with his dog, Henry spotted a pair of legs in the orchard behind the trees. He watched as the legs moved from behind the bushes, and what he saw was startling. The legs belonged to a headless apparition. There was said to be a phantom coach spotted on several occasions. A large black coach, pulled by 4 black horses, would clatter down the road, driven by 2 headless coachmen. After it passed the rectory, it would disappear altogether. Though you could see the coach, it never made a sound. Foister remained at the rectory until and after his death on June 9th, 1927. Many have reported seeing his ghost on more than one occasion. After Reverend Henry's death, the rectory stood vacant for a while. That was until Reverend Guy Eric Smith and his family took up the post. One day, Mrs. Smith was cleaning the kitchen. Cleaning out a cupboard, she came upon a strange paper package. When she opened it, she was horrified to discover a human skull. The Reverend took the skull and buried it in one of the churchyards. Despite burying the skull, the family believed its discovery was a trigger for worsening poltergeist activity. It was reported that in the Blue Room, they could hear whispering that turned to pleading. "Don't, Carlos, don't." They contacted the local newspaper and asked them to help put them in contact with someone who could help. A reporter visited the home and they were introduced to Harry Price, a paranormal investigator. Harry Price had formed the National Laboratory for Psychical Research and was well known for debunking and exposing fraudulent mediums and spiritual photographers. As soon as he arrived at Borley Rectory, things began to happen. Not only were there noises and flying objects, but now pebbles were hitting the house and rolling down the stairs. They could hear messages being tapped out on the frame of a mirror in the Blue Room. The Smith family remained at the rectory for less than a year, leaving on July the 14th, 1929, due to ghostly activity and curious onlookers. At this point, the rectory remained vacant for more than a year while they searched for a new reverend to take over. Though the Ball family was no longer responsible for the rectory, they still had family in the area. After much encouragement, they were able to convince a family member, Reverend Lionel Foister, to join the parish in 1930. The Reverend, his much younger wife Mary Ann, and their adopted daughter Adelaide moved in. Ghostly activity increased in intensity. Now things were disappearing without a trace, while objects the family didn't recognise appeared from nowhere. Items were thrown at the couple, and on one occasion an item hit Mary Ann so hard she was left with a black eye and cut face. Then strange and mysterious messages began to appear on walls of the house, often addressed to Mary Ann. The messages read, "Mary Ann, help, get. Mary Ann, light mass prayers. And pleas for help and prayers." The family had the house exorcised twice, but the activity continued. Harry Price visited the home again and was able to record numerous more incidents, including a strangeness with wine. Price had taken 2 bottles of wine with him to the home. Before either bottle was opened, one had turned to ink, the other to perfume. Both bottles had been sealed. In October 1935, Reverend Foister and his family left the rectory due to his poor health, including advanced arthritis. His diary explained happenings at Borley was sent to Harry Price. The church had given up finding anyone to take over the parish. They put the rectory up for sale and it sat vacant for 2 years. But then Harry Price contacted the church. He went to rent the house for a year for a paranormal investigation. They agreed, and on May the 2nd, 1937, Price placed an ad in the Times. Haunted house. Responsible persons of leisure intelligence, intrepid, critical, and unbiased, are invited to join a rota of observers in a year's night and day investigation of an alleged haunted house in the home counties. Printed instructions supplied, scientific training or ability to operate simple instruments an advantage. House situated in a lonely hamlet, so own car is essential. Write P.O. Box H 989 The Times EC4. After conducting several interviews, Price ended up with 48 observers to join him at the rectory at various times. Their job was to record anything they saw, heard, or felt. On March 27, 1938, they held a séance. During the séance, they were able to make contact with 2 spirits. The first spirit was a Catholic nun named Marie Lier. She had come from France to the nunnery at Bourges, where she met, fell in love with, and married Henry Waldegrave. It is believed that his home once stood on the ground the rectory was built on. One evening, in a fit of rage, Henry strangled Marie Lier and buried her body in the cellar. Price believed this could be the spirit that had been trying to communicate with Mary Ann Foister. The second spirit identified itself as Sunnox Amers. The spirit claimed that a fire would start in the hallway and the rectory would burn to the ground that very night in the ashes. They would then discover the bones of murder victims. The house did not burn that night. Harry Price finished out his lease and left the rectory. The building was taken over by William Hart Gregson, an architect, who had purchased it in December 1938 to turn it into a tourist attraction. Gregson had a dog with him who was spooked by the paranormal activity and ran away. On February 27, 1939, while unpacking his belongings, he bumped into an oil lamp in the hallway. The building caught fire and burnt to ruins. While the house burned, one person reported witnessing the nun looking down at them from the window in the blue room. In 1943, Harry Price returned to the rectory once more. This time his goal was to excavate the cellar area. There he discovered bones, including the jawbone of a young woman. Though he tried to have them buried at Borley Cemetery, the church had refused, claiming they were nothing more than pig bones. They were eventually interred at Liston Church. During the demolition of the ruins, 2 photos were taken. In one, you could see a brick floating in mid-air, while the other showed a shadowy figure walking amongst the tombstones in the nearby cemetery. After this, ghostly activity moved, centering mostly in the church and the cemetery.